Hey, I'm Shay Keister, and I'm your host for the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast, the beef producer's place to explore new management practices. Thanks for tuning in, and welcome to the community. Hey folks, it's Shay here, and today we are going to be visiting with Shelby Cornelius and Zeb about nutrition when it comes to weaning and receiving calves. And so we're going to dive into some things that cattle producers need to keep in mind, some specific products to think about, and it'll be a great conversation about that today. Before we dive into that, I just want to let you know that I am opening my group coaching for podcasts. And what we're going to do is we're going to take you from that podcast idea all the way to a launch in 6 weeks. So if you are interested in that, message me on Facebook or go to my website and find the contact me page, send me an email, and I will get back to you right away and we will get you registered. So with that, let's get on with the conversation today. All right. Well, Zeb, Shelby, it is great to have you on the podcast today. And we're going to be talking a little bit about nutrition when it comes to weaning time because, I guess this episode comes out in August, but it's important to be thinking about that kind of year round, and producers are going to be starting to think about that, I guess, depending on where they're at in the country. So before we dive into that topic, would each of you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what your role in the beef industry is today and kind of how you fit into the industry? Zeb, let's start with you.
Okay, thanks for having us, Shay. Currently, I serve as a technical service rep for a company called Diamond V. Diamond V is based out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and that's where our manufacturing plant is. And so day to day, I work and call on nutritionists at different feed companies and then support them in their field with their customers how to best use our product, which is a feed additive. But prior to that, spent about 5 years doing nutrition work for producers. And before that, I was at the University of Wyoming. Personally, I run some cows with my family at nights and on the weekends. So I kind of live and breathe beef cows.
Well, that's good to hear. Shelby, how about you? What's your role in the beef industry today?
Well, I'm Shelby Cornelius, and I'm a district sales manager with Vitalix, and kind of serve the upper Midwest. Been here for about 3.5 years now, and was outside of Vitalix, raised a few Black Angus cows at home, and live in Northeast Iowa.
That's awesome. And we can dive a little bit more into that later in the conversation. And I sure appreciate Vitalix being a partner of this podcast and some great products too. So as we kind of dive into the topic of today, I want to talk a little bit about weaning and stress. So as a whole, if stress isn't really managed properly, what negative impacts are we going to see on calves around the weaning period?
Well, the most severe negative impact would be death. If stress isn't managed, and that ultimately stress usually leads to sickness, and it can culminate in death if severe enough. So I would say most ranchers and cattlemen, though, are pretty experienced. And so it's not like we deal with train wrecks in every group of calves every year, but we still have to deal with it at times. Probably the biggest profit robber, though, is just those cattle that still get sick even when we're trying to manage stress. And the problem with stress and sickness is that when an immune response is prompted in that animal, it is a very energy demanding event, meaning that basically all the energy that calf is consuming through the diet is going to go towards that immune function and to try to fight off that sickness or fight off that stress. And ultimately, we don't make money when the calf is going through that process, because we make money by putting pounds on. And usually if they're sick or if they're stressed, they're not putting pounds on.
So my opinion, just going along with what Zeb said there, stress isn't being handled correctly. We can see a multitude of negative impacts. Animals breaking with illness, which is often going to result in money either being wrapped up with a vet or getting a VFD to get those cattle turned around. Cattle can go off of feed. Producers are often going to see, a negative implications by a drop in performance at the bunk in terms of average daily gain and the increase of their vet bill.
all things that can add cost, whether it's time or needing vaccines or anything like that. That's all an extra expense, and it's not fun to see any calves sick either. So, since we're going to focus on the nutrition side of things today, what can cattle producers do? We're going to talk about before and during weaning, but let's talk about before weaning now from the nutrition side. What can cattle producers do to set those calves up for success before the weaning period?
Well, I think, but if you're talking before the weaning period, it's mostly going to be focused on that cow and making sure that she had adequate nutrition pre-calving, because if that calf failed to get the passive transfers of antibodies through that colostrum, it really is a challenge the rest of that calf's life to catch up. And matter of fact, they're about 5 times more likely to die before weaning if they don't get those antibodies through the colostrum. So, that's not just right before weaning. That starts 6-7 months prior to the weaning process. But that one is key. And then from there, making sure that pair has adequate nutrition, that she's milking adequately and keeping that calf going. And then as we get closer to the weaning process, obviously that calf's probably going to be consuming its own forage. And so you want to make sure that, there's just adequate forage available. And I would stress clean water as well. Water is one of the most important things that it is the most important thing when it comes to nutrition, and is often the most easily overlooked. So I think those would be my focuses pre-weaning.
Mhm. And to add along with what Zeb said there, oftentimes when I'm talking to cattle producers, even the month up to weaning those calves, I think it's important to make sure we're giving those calves products just to help kind of prime the pump, so to speak, in terms of just making sure those calves have a healthy gut and strong rumen intact before we pull them off those calves.
Yeah, so let's talk about the product side a little bit more. So I want to go back to pre-calving, and then we'll come back and talk about that kind of month before weaning too. So pre-calving, if we're looking at products and nutrition, what are you kind of recommending for producers to have for those cows to make sure that they have the nutrition that's going to be transferred into that colostrum and that milk?
Well, I'll jump in here and Shelby can talk about some of the additive side, but the main thing is energy. We got to make sure that cow has enough energy um, to produce those antibodies, produce that milk. And oftentimes protein is really important, but when it comes to supplementing protein to a cow, we really supplement protein so she can eat more feed and get more energy. Um, and then when it comes to vitamins and minerals, those things are super important. And we got to make sure to pay attention to that. But if our cows are in poor body condition score, usually that is a lack of energy consumption, and that has long lasting effects on that pair.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Couldn't agree more. And to go along with that, pre-calving at Vitalix, we kind of like to use our number 10 breedback tub. And we even have an elite breedback tub that would have full rates of Avela 4 from Zinpro, as well as Diamune, which is organic selenium, nature safe, and XPC Ultra yeast from our friends at Diamond V. And that breedback tub is, has the extra added fat and protein to help kind of push those cows, so to speak, through that. I always recommend the last trimester through about 60 days post calving, just to set them up for success. That's the most crucial part of their year, essentially, to deliver a healthy calf and to heal up and turn around and get bred back within 80 days. There's a lot we're asking for them. So we try to give them all we got, so to speak, in that time period.
Absolutely. It definitely is a lot we're asking, but also very important, especially as we're looking at keeping a tight calving interval too. So let's talk a little bit about, Shelby, you mentioned getting some product out there, maybe even like, a month, 6 weeks before weaning. So those calves kind of get used to it a little bit. What does that look like? What are you seeing work for producers there?
Yeah. Honestly, when I'm working with our dealer network, our dealers going out on farms, those guys that are able to put out our Kickstart weaning tub which I guess I always kind of call it a souped up stress tub, if you will, because of the nature safe and the Vela 4, and it really pushes the meter down. Just getting those calves ready to go. Those, they've already done their pre-shots, and now they're in that 3-week period there, and they got those Kickstart tubs on those calves. When they do pull the calves off, those mama cows, the calves already know what the tub is, and they're used to it. So you're not hitting that window there when we all know how it is. If you wean a group of calves and they're not used to something, they're bawling, they're walking the pen, they're looking for their mom. They already see the tub out there. They know what it is. They keep going up and hitting that, which of course we all know lick tubs produce saliva, which helps pique their appetite to go to the bunk and have that water and that ration that's being provided to those calves to keep them functioning on all cylinders.
Zeb, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that, at the end of the day, if we can just have if we can minimize the occurrence of new events at one time, that works really well. And so to Shelby's point, if we can do something pre-weaning to introduce them to a new feedstuff or to up their basal nutrition levels through a tub, which are, super convenient for cow-calfmen, come weaning time, then we're just focused on removing that calf from the cow, and it already knows how to do certain things. And so, yeah, I think the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, applies very well here.
So what about during the weaning period? You put the pre-work in, but you wean the calves. Now what can producers do nutritionally to keep those calves on the right track and help with their animal health too? Because in my mind, animal health is also impacted by nutrition too, right? It's all tied together. So what can they do?
Well, I'm going to re-emphasize water. And Shay, I know your podcast, you're located in the West, and so it may be even more critical to folks close to you, in that the rumen is about 88% water, right? And so if the calf isn't drinking, that fermentation that needs to occur for them to utilize feedstuffs is not going to work very well. So not only are they going to be dehydrated themselves, but their apparatus to get nutrition out of feedstuffs is not going to work. And in Western environments, lots of times, if they rely on live water through a stream or a creek or river or something, and all of a sudden you put them in a pen with the water in this box in the corner, sometimes you can really struggle to get those calves to seek that out. And so oftentimes the easiest thing there is just to let that thing overflow for a little bit. But clean water, easily accessible, I think is really key. I think Shelby talked about the tubs, and the cool thing about a tub is it's movable. So putting that tub where those calves want to hang out in the pen, and just make it super easy for them to run into is really is a really good idea. And then beyond that, I would just encourage people to certainly work with a nutritionist to make sure that the ration that they're providing, and that can be a mixed ration, it can be a supplement in addition to a free choice forage or something, but that it's adequate in terms of energy, in terms of protein, and in terms of vitamins and minerals. That'll solve a lot of problems right there, is if we make sure that total nutritional program is adequate to what those calves need at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So do producers who are selling right off the cow versus producers who are backgrounding for a bit need to be managing differently on the nutrition side? Or do you kind of think this advice fits both scenarios?
Well, the guy that's selling right off the cow, if he's truly selling right off the cow, I would say his main thing that he needs to manage from a profit side of things is his shrink. And so that would be, not separating the cow and calf 2 days before you're going to haul them in the sale barn. I mean, it really needs to be a fresh gather and as close to the sale time as possible. And then when you take them to the sale barn, hopefully, they're not going to sit there in the barn for another day or something, right? We want to those producers would want to market them, as close to when they pull them off the cow as possible. Now, long term, I would say those things we already talked about a minute ago, if those calves aren't set up nutritionally to go on to that next producer or that next stage, long term, it'll probably affect, the demand for his calves next year. And so I don't want to say just because you're selling off the cow doesn't make it any less important to do all those things right. But my point would be is if you're selling off the cow, managing your shrink around the time of sale is super important. And then of course the guy that's going to wean them and background them, or maybe even just precondition them for 30 days, those things that we just mentioned here a second ago would be very applicable to that producer.
And to go along, just to add to what Deb said there, I mean, as a producer selling right off the cow, my advice to that person, the other things you can do just to try to help yourself, set yourself up for success with those cattle, keep them on those products that are going to have an ROI, like the Avela4, the Nature Safe, pounds pay, right? And so giving them those products that are proven to help with weight gain, and overall performance, and an strong immune response and a healthy gut, that's what's going to make the difference for that gentleman versus someone who's not using those products. And like what Zeb said, that's going to affect who wants to buy those cattle from that person next year.
That's a great point. When you asked that question, I was thinking just right around the sale process. But what Shelby just mentioned, if you're going to sell right off the cow, I mean, that is your paycheck. And so you really probably need to be thinking about nutrition, 60 days prior to that date, not just the week of. And if you go with, a tub like Vitalix, or, maybe even some creep feed, something like that, if you're going beyond and above and beyond to set that calf up for the next stage, that really, you need to make that known at the sale barn, right? You need to make that auction barn know that, make it known to the buyers that, hey, these calves, I went to the extra effort to set them up and they're ready to go. And so that might not be necessarily, they're going to weigh a whole lot more, but they might just bring more per pound because the buyers know that. That's a marketing issue, probably more than a nutritional issue at that point.
So I know we had you on here to talk about nutrition, but you opened up the marketing door. So who do they talk to at the barn to relay that message? Is that the barn owner, manager? How do they connect with buyers directly to make sure that that information is accurately displayed about their calves?
I've had customers talk to the sale barn manager who's up also at the auction block that day, and they give them a piece of paper with everything they've done to set those cattle up, and they make sure they announce that when those cattle come in the ring, and that's been beneficial for those customers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the manager or the owner, but to Shelby's point, whoever's on the auction block, those cattle need to be represented, and that probably is, represented with their shot schedule, with additional nutrition that they've offered, when they were castrated, or if they were castrated, probably some genetic history. And if you ever watch sales on the internet through the different barns, and a set of calves come in, and the guy in the auction block's like, I don't know what to tell you. Here they are. They weigh this amount. Usually it's a pretty short sale.
Yeah.
So you two have touched on kind of different additives and components of different products in a diet, but I do want to kind of go back to that and ask it as more of a direct question. So as a whole, what do producers need to be looking for when they're selecting products, tubs, other minerals, whatever it may be? I mean, Zeb, I know you made a great point about working with a nutritionist, and I think that's really important for all cattle producers because we can't be experts in everything. But what does the cattle producer need to understand and know about the different components of products?
Well, I think it probably does get a little challenging to identify each additive in a particular supplement, but my overall recommendation is, make sure a product has some research behind it, and that can be, total number of studies or the length of time it's been around. But you do want to have some research, and Shelby mentioned a second ago about ROI, or return on investment. you probably want to see some economics attached to those research studies, that if I spend, this many cents per head per day, what does it take to earn that back, or what is my expected return over that cost? And so, yeah, there's a lot. The feed additive business is a crowded space, and at Diamond V, we're celebrating our 80th year this year. We pride ourselves on research. I think we're over close to 350 journal publications and peer-reviewed research, in addition to all of our field studies and lab studies. So I would say, just you want to have an idea of what the research is behind the product and some of the claims that are made with the product, and then how best to utilize it. Where does it fit best in your operation? And that's probably part of the conversation with a salesman or with a nutritionist.
Shelby, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and as a producer, going along with what Zeb said there about looking for things that have, research and data behind it, return on investment. As a cattle producer, you may want to consider an organic mineral source. What does that look like? What kind of products to look for? Products that are going to have an impact on your on gut health, immune response, those kinds of things. And I think it's also really valuable for a producer to know, do you have any deficiencies in your soils, out in your pastures, that are going to come back to haunt you down the road? I know quite a few producers in certain parts of the Midwest that are deficient in selenium. So using the Diamune product from Diamond V, for an example, has come in really handy for those guys to avoid things like white muscle disease. So
Why did you say to look at the inorganic product? Is that what you said? Why organic?
looking for organic minerals, chelated
Okay.
minerals,
Okay. Why is that important?
more bioavailable to the ruminant versus not, right? So getting, again, that performance out of them, a better return on investment versus a mineral that might not be as organic. Zeb, can you help me out on that one?
You bet. So when he talks about organic minerals, the word organic just simply means carb. It contains carbon, right? But my little take on that is, the rumen is a very hostile environment, and so if you put a naked mineral into the rumen, the microbes are really good about grabbing that, utilizing it in their reproduction process, or breaking it down into some other form. And all of a sudden, you're putting mineral into this animal's diet. And because these are ruminant animals, the animal is not necessarily benefiting from it. Now, there's some argument that they still need a lot, they still need some inorganic mineral. But what's been common here in the past is for companies to take a mineral and chelate it to something, and usually it's a carbon containing source. I would say amino acids are probably the most common here, but by binding that mineral to an amino acid, it protects it. It binds it in a way that the microbes in the rumen are not able to break it down. And so what ends up happening is the mineral will get through the rumen to the lower gut, and then because it's bound to an amino acid, the animal will actually absorb the mineral through the amino acid pathway, which is a much more efficient process than through a mineral pathway. And so maybe I should sell minerals, but really what they're doing is the chemists are hijacking some of that process to help get mineral in there more efficiently and get it through that rumen so it is available to the animal.
I appreciate you both going through and explaining that a little more, because I know that has been kind of I've talked about it on one of my Rancher Mind calls before, and that was kind of one of the big things is, what do all these words mean? Why do they matter? When we're looking at mineral tags, products in general. So I appreciate you going through and explaining that here on the podcast as well. So kind of thinking big picture, I want to hear both of your responses. If each of you had like your own magic wand and you could change any one thing about how cattle producers manage during the weaning and receiving period, what would you change and why?
My answer, and I don't know if I could say it was common, but the biggest wrecks that I see is somebody that, and maybe I kind of mentioned this like with the guy that's going to sell her off the cow, short wean calves, something between 5 days and really even 30 days. Um, those are the biggest wrecks I see in the feedlot sector, where it just seems like either get them off the cow one day and sell them the next, or you better hold on to them for 30 days and probably even better 45 days. And what I said earlier about the fewer disturbances we can introduce at one time, the better. I just would really discourage short wean calves that are between that window of one day and 30 days, because it just does not seem to work out very well in the calves' favor from my experiences.
What about you, Shelby?
If I could change anything, I wish I could change mindsets a little bit of there's some out there that it don't do anything to set their calves up. There's no, whether that's a stress tub or, they were using some kind of a nice transition during that weaning period, or even creep feed. They just pull them off the cows and here we go. And the dangerous words of this is how we've always done it doesn't work. And it's not a matter of if, it's when the train wreck comes. And on the day's market price on what a calf is worth, I think it's worth the investment to make sure we're giving them everything we can to set them up for success.
Absolutely. And I think last year I did a whole mastermind Q&A series between beef producers and cattlemen. And one of the things we talked about was that sometimes what's right for the calf isn't always easiest for the human, but it's worth it to set those calves up for success no matter what you're doing. So I guess with that, before we kind of wrap up today, do either of you have any parting thoughts or final thoughts that you want to share, whether that's about weaning products, whatever it may be?
If there's one thing I would try to take away from today, those cattle that are going to be consuming products like Nature Safe, XPC Ultra Yeast, and Avela 4, those products are known to help immune response, a healthy gut, increased weaning weight, reduce morbidity. And the bottom line is you're going to have stronger, healthier, and heavier calves at sale time. And that's what's going to, make it or break your fall.
So Nature Safe is a product that you guys have mentioned a couple times. Can one of you explain a little bit about what that is so that those listening have a better understanding of what we're talking about?
Sure. So Nature Safe is what we call our next generation product. And before I explain next generation, probably take just a brief second here and explain what first generation is. In the industry, if you've heard of Diamond V, oftentimes we just get referred to as Diamond V yeast, and we'll take that. It's simple, it's easy to recognize, but we don't really sell yeast. At our plant there in Cedar Rapids, we utilize yeast as a microbial engine, and we generate a fermentation with that yeast, using as the engine of the process, and we tightly control that fermentation process, tightly control. And the end result is through that process is a culture of different metabolites that, when fed to livestock, and in this case particularly to beef cattle, we see an improvement in production. And most of that stems from a healthier gut and being able to get more out of feed. And so I mentioned earlier, we've been in business for 80 years now. Really, for the first 70, we kind of about had one product, and it was called XPC. XPC yeast is what a lot of people call it. But the hallmarks of that product were better energy production in that gut, and mostly stemming from better bug production. And we talked about the rumen earlier. Our new generation product is called Nature Safe, and that builds upon XPC. And really, it builds upon being able to get more energy out of feed. But really, the main difference is that we've been able to document that when fed to livestock, it kind of primes that immune system. And so, when they're going through stressful situations like weaning, like some weather challenges, then it, they're better able to cope with that. And we've been it's been great to work with Vitalix and see the success that their customers have had utilizing that product over the last several years.
Thank you for going through and diving into that and explaining that so that we all have a better understanding, Zeb.
You bet.
Do you have any other final thoughts that you want to share, Zeb, or do you just kind of want to say?
I would just leave your listeners with, I know, we are experiencing record cattle prices right now, feeders, all-time highs, fat cattle, all-time highs, box beef, all-time highs, barring the COVID event there in 2020. But there's a lot of money that it takes to raise these cattle, and you throw on 8-9% interest rates. I would just say don't be flippant with your decisions. Visit with somebody that, to Shay's point about, you can't be experts in everything. So whether that's an extension person, whether that's a nutritionist or a feed rep, some of these ingredient company representatives, don't be afraid to ask for opinions and make sure to put numbers to what you're going to do if you're looking to buy calves or retain calves. Because if you're looking to retain them, they're worth a lot of money the day you wean them. And so we just want to I would just say, make sure to have a game plan going forward. And some of the risk management tools with the LRP changes last year, maybe that's really attractive to you. So I'd just say be cautious. It's an exciting time, but boy, there's just a lot of dollars that it's taking right now to make this cattle thing go.
Absolutely. And we're all about increasing that profitability when we have tight margins. So, well, thank you both for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and knowledge and help break down the nutritional side of the weaning process for my listeners.
Great to be here.
Touché.
And that's a wrap on that one, folks. Thank you for tuning in today and joining in on the conversation. Be sure to take this a step further and take the advice you learned and implement it on your operation. If you want to have a conversation about it, head over to my social media and send me a DM by following @CattleConvos and connecting with me there. Have a great day.